The stars of the outer rim were suddenly violently warped, stretching into terrifying ribbons of violet and crimson light. Aboard the bridge of the Republic Venator-class Star Destroyer Resolute, klaxons wailed in a deafening chorus. General Anakin Skywalker gripped the edge of the holotable, his knuckles white, as the ship shook violently beneath his boots. Next to him, General Obi-Wan Kenobi maintained his balance with the quiet, centered calm of a Jedi Master, though his eyes betrayed a deep concern. Clone troopers scrambled across the crew pits, their armor clattering as they desperately tried to stabilize the massive warship. The hyperspace lane had collapsed. Without warning, a localized tear in the fabric of space-time, a spatial anomaly of unimaginable power, had simply swallowed the Resolute whole. Outside the viewport, there was no blackness of space, no familiar stellar constellations, only a swirling, chaotic vortex of subspace energy that screamed against the deflector shields. Countless light-years away, across the bounds of reality itself, a similar emergency was unfolding on the bridge of the USS Enterprise E. Captain Jean-Luc Picard braced himself against his command chair as inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for a violent, sudden shift in gravity. The Sovereign-class starship had been running a routine sweep near the Romulan neutral zone when a subspace distortion erupted without warning, dragging the flagship of the United Federation of Planets into its depths. Commander William Riker was shouting orders over the din of exploding EPS conduits. At the ops station, Lieutenant Commander Data's hands were a blur across the consoles, his android brain processing the telemetry of an anomaly that defied all known physics. Counselor Deanna Troi gripped her seat, her empathic senses overwhelmed by a sudden, jarring displacement, a feeling of being ripped from the very tapestry of their universe. In an instant, the violent shaking aboard both vessels ceased. The blinding vortex vanished, replaced by the cold, silent void of normal space. On the Resolute, Anakin exhaled sharply, letting go of the holotable. He reached out with the Force, expecting to feel the familiar thrum of the galaxy, the distant echoes of the Clone Wars, the presence of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Instead, he felt a void. It was not empty, but it was profoundly alien. The cosmic signature was entirely wrong. Obi-Wan closed his eyes, his brow furrowing deeply. The Force was here, as it was everywhere, but the texture of it, the very fabric of life in this space, was completely unknown to him. Admiral Yularen approached the generals, his uniform immaculate despite the chaos. He reported that the nav computer was completely lost. None of the star charts matched. The constellations were unrecognized. They were no longer in their galaxy. Aboard the Enterprise, Picard straightened his uniform, his sharp eyes scanning the main view screen. The stars had returned, but Data immediately reported that they were no longer in the Alpha Quadrant, nor anywhere within the known Milky Way of their reality. Astrometrics confirmed a dimensional shift. However, they were not alone in this new sector of space. Data announced that sensors were detecting a massive spatial structure directly ahead, along with a fleet of unknown vessels. Furthermore, a second displaced ship had just emerged from the same subspace wake that had deposited the Enterprise. Picard ordered the view screen magnified. The image shifted to reveal two startling sights. The first was a colossal ring floating in the vacuum of space, composed of massive, segmented blocks linked together by energy fields. It was easily the size of a small moon, a Stargate of unimaginable proportions. Surrounding it was a motley armada of starships. Some were blocky, utilitarian vessels with gray hulls. Others were golden, pyramid-like structures, and still others were sleek, organic-looking craft. It was a coalition fleet, holding position, weapons powered, but not firing. The second sight was the ship that had arrived with them. The view screen displayed the Venator-class Star Destroyer. Picard studied the aggressive, wedge-shaped design, the prominent command bridges, and the massive red stripe painted down its dorsal spine. It was heavily armed, bristling with what sensors identified as high-yield plasma weaponry. yet its engine signatures and structural alloys were completely foreign to the Starfleet database. On the Resolute, Anakin and Obi-Wan were looking at the exact same scene. Clone Commander Cody relayed the sensor data. A massive fleet was gathered around a gigantic ring, and off to their port side was an elegant, saucer-shaped vessel with twin-engine nacelles sweeping backward. It possessed no visible turbo lasers, but Anakin could sense a quiet, powerful energy radiating from it. Obi-Wan suggested caution. They had stumbled into what appeared to be the staging ground for a massive conflict, and they were the unknown variables. Before either Picard or the Jedi could order a hailing frequency, the space within the colossal ring began to distort. The Stargate SG-1 universe was about to experience its darkest hour. Aboard the Earthship Odyssey, Lieutenant Colonel Cameron Mitchell watched the sudden appearance of the two massive, unknown starships with intense alarm. The Coalition fleet, comprising Earth's Daedalus-class carriers, Asgard cruisers, Tukara vessels, Jaffa Hattaks, and Lucian Alliance ships, was already on a knife's edge. They were gathered at the supergate, P3Y229, waiting for the inevitable invasion of the Ori. Colonel Samantha Carter, aboard the Russian-crewed Korolev, was frantically analyzing the sensor data of the two new arrivals. She realized instantly that they did not match Ori technology, nor were they ancient, Wraith, or Goa'uld. But there was no time to investigate. The supergate activated. A massive plume of unstable energy erupted from the giant ring, a kawoosh of cosmic proportions that vaporized anything caught in its path. The event horizon settled into a shimmering pool of blue light. The Coalition fleet braced for impact. The Ori were coming. From the shimmering blue event horizon of the supergate emerged 4 ships of terrifying size and design. They were shaped like massive, glowing rings, hollow in the center, with a single, glowing white sphere suspended at the core. They radiated an aura of divine, oppressive power. On the bridge of the Resolute, both Anakin and Obi-Wan staggered backward as a wave of pure, concentrated darkness washed over them. The Force screamed in agony. The beings commanding those ring ships, the priors of the Ori, projected a telepathic weight of subjugation and fanaticism that felt like a physical blow to the Jedi. Anakin ignited his lightsaber instinctively, the blue blade humming in the quiet bridge, his eyes locked on the Ori vessels. He declared that whatever those ships were, they were imbued with a darkness that made the Sith look like children. The Battle of P3Y229 began, not as a fight, but as a slaughter. The Ori motherships opened fire. A single beam of blinding yellow-white energy lashed out from the leading Ori vessel, striking a Jaffa Hattak. The Goa'uld-designed energy shields flared for a fraction of a millisecond before completely collapsing. The beam tore through the Golden Pyramid ship, detonating its core and reducing the massive vessel to expanding clouds of vapor and debris. A second beam instantly annihilated a Lucian Alliance cruiser. The Coalition fleet returned fire with everything they had. Railguns, plasma blasts, and Asgard energy weapons rained down on the Ori ships, but the energy dissipated harmlessly against their white, iridescent shields. Aboard the Enterprise, Picard watched the massacre with grim horror. Data reported that the Coalition fleet's weapons were entirely ineffective against the enemy shields. The enemy weapons were utilizing a phased energy projection that bypassed standard deflector technology. Riker pointed out that the gray ships, the Earth vessels, were taking heavy damage. The Korolev was venting atmosphere, its shields failing under a glancing blow from an Ori primary weapon. Picard did not hesitate. The Prime Directive did not apply to a one-sided slaughter in an alternate universe. He ordered Red Alert. The bridge lighting shifted to a harsh, tactical crimson. He ordered Data to lay in an intercept course between the damaged Earthship and the closest Ori vessel, and commanded Worf to lock on with quantum torpedoes and set phasers to a rotating modulation frequency to test those impenetrable shields. At the exact same moment, Anakin Skywalker refused to stand by and watch a massacre. He looked at Obi-Wan, who simply nodded, knowing there was no stopping his former Padawan when innocent lives were at stake. Anakin ordered Admiral Yularen to move the Resolute into a flanking position and bring all heavy turbo-laser batteries to bear. He then turned to Cody, ordering all fighter squadrons to launch immediately. Anakin dashed from the bridge, heading straight for the hangar bay and his customized Jedi starfighter. The Korolev was helpless. Aboard the Earthship, sparks showered the bridge as alarms screamed. An Ori mothership aligned its primary weapon for the killing blow. Colonel Carter braced for the inevitable, but the killing blow never reached them. The USS Enterprise E dropped out of impulse directly in the path of the Ori weapon. The blinding yellow beam struck the Enterprise's forward regenerative deflector shields. The Sovereign-class starship shuddered violently. On the bridge, consoles exploded, and crew members were thrown to the deck. Data reported shields were down to 40% from a single impact, but they were holding. The regenerative properties of Starfleet shields, combined with their multiphasic nature, managed to refract and absorb the Ori beam in a way the Asgard shields of the Earthships could not. Picard pulled himself back into his chair, his voice booming across the bridge. He ordered a full spread of quantum torpedoes. 4 brilliant blue streaks of zero-point energy shot from the Enterprise's launchers, striking the Ori mothership's shields. The explosions were blinding. The zero-point energy reaction of the quantum torpedoes caused a massive destabilization in the Ori shielding. The iridescent white glow of the enemy shields flickered and dimmed. Worf instantly followed up with a continuous barrage of Type Twudthun phasers, the amber beam sweeping across the Ori hull, physically searing the advanced armor beneath the fluctuating shields. The Ori commander, a pale, blind prior, sensed a disruption in his divine vision. This new vessel defied the will of the Ori, but before the prior could order a secondary strike on the Enterprise, the space surrounding the Ori fleet erupted into a chaotic swarm of starfighters. Hundreds of V-wings and ARC-170s poured from the ventral hangars of the Resolute. They swarmed the 4 Ori motherships like angry hornets. Standard Stargate combat rarely involved hundreds of small, agile fighter craft engaging capital ships in such dense formations. The Ori automated point defense systems, designed to target slower bombers or capital ship missiles, struggled to track the incredibly fast, erratic movements of the Republic pilots. Leading the charge was Anakin Skywalker. His yellow Jedi interceptor spun through the void, completely defying standard physics, as he used the Force to anticipate enemy fire before it was even triggered. He commanded Gold Squadron, a specialized wing of Y-wing bombers, to follow his exact trajectory. Anakin reached out with the Force, feeling for the source of the Ori ship's power, feeling for the mechanics hidden beneath its armor. He found a massive energy confluence near the glowing central sphere. Meanwhile, the Resolute arrived on the flank. Admiral Yularen ordered a full broadside. Dozens of heavy turbo-laser turrets opened fire simultaneously. Massive bolts of concentrated plasma slammed into the shields of the second Ori mothership. While Starfleet weapons relied on exotic particles and subspace mechanics, Republic turbo-lasers relied on sheer, overwhelming, brute force thermal and kinetic energy. The sheer volume of fire from the Venator began to overwhelm the Ori shield emitters, simply by transferring more thermal energy than the heat sinks could disperse. Aboard the Odyssey, Cameron Mitchell and his crew stared at the tactical display in absolute shock. The slaughter had stopped. The Coalition fleet had been on the verge of total annihilation, but these 2 unknown ships had completely disrupted the Ori formation. Mitchell ordered the Odyssey to fall in behind the saucer-shaped ship, realizing that its shields could actually withstand the Ori main weapon. The battle became a chaotic, swirling melee. The Enterprise danced through the enemy formation, its impulse engines providing a level of sublight maneuverability that the lumbering Ori motherships could not match. Picard coordinated with Riker and Worf, exploiting the momentary shield fluctuations caused by their quantum torpedoes to beam photon torpedoes directly near the hull of the Ori ships, detonating them at point-blank range. High above, Anakin found his opening. The sheer volume of turbolaser fire from the Resolute had weakened the forward shields of the primary Ori vessel. Anakin ordered Gold Squadron to unleash their proton torpedoes. Dozens of glowing blue munitions snaked through the void, passing through the weakened shield barrier and striking the ring structure directly around the glowing central sphere. The explosions cascaded, setting off secondary detonations within the Ori mothership. The massive vessel shuddered, its primary weapon emitter completely shattered. The ship began to list heavily, internal fires venting into space. Sensing the destruction, the priors aboard the remaining 3 motherships experienced something they had never felt before: doubt. Their God-given invincibility had been shattered in minutes by forces they could not comprehend. The force wielders aboard the Venator blocked their telepathic influence, and the technological prowess of the Enterprise countered their advanced weaponry. With one ship severely crippled and their shields failing against the relentless combined assault of quantum torpedoes and heavy turbolasers, the priors made a tactical retreat. They could not allow their holy fleet to be destroyed in its first engagement. The 3 intact motherships locked onto the crippled vessel, generating a massive hyperspace window, and fled the system, leaving the wreckage of the Coalition fleet behind. Silence fell over P3Y-229. The supergate sat dormant once more. Aboard the Korolev, Samantha Carter breathed a ragged sigh of relief, realizing they were still alive. Aboard the Odyssey, Mitchell ordered hailing frequencies open to the 2 savior ships. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Picard ordered a stand-down from Red Alert, though shields remained raised. Data reported that the enemy vessels had fled the sector using a form of hyperspace transit. Picard nodded, adjusting his uniform, and instructed communications to open a channel to the Earth vessels and the heavily armed wedge-shaped ship. Anakin landed his interceptor back in the hangar of the Resolute, leaping out before the landing gear had fully settled. He rushed back to the bridge, reuniting with Obi-Wan. The Force was still turbulent, but the immediate oppressive darkness of the Ori had vanished. Yularen informed them they were receiving an audio-visual transmission from the saucer-shaped vessel and the gray ships that had been defending the ring. The main view screen on the Enterprise, the holotable on the Resolute, and the monitors on the Odyssey and Korolev all synced. Picard spoke first, his voice calm, diplomatic, and carrying the weight of Starfleet authority. He introduced himself as Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise, representing the United Federation of Planets. He stated that they had been pulled through a spatial anomaly and offered his assistance to the damaged fleet. Anakin's hologram flickered into existence on the Enterprise and Odyssey bridges. He introduced himself as General Anakin Skywalker of the Grand Army of the Republic, accompanied by General Obi-Wan Kenobi. They too were victims of a hyperspace collapse. Mitchell, speaking for the Earth forces, wiped sweat from his brow and thanked both crews, stating bluntly that if they hadn't shown up, everyone in the Milky Way galaxy would be speaking in chants and bowing to burning bushes by next Tuesday. He introduced Stargate Command and the Tauri, inviting the leaders of both stranded vessels to follow them back to Earth to meet with Major General Hank Landry. The journey to Earth took several days, giving both displaced crews time to fully realize the gravity of their situation. Geordi LaForge and Data worked tirelessly, analyzing the stellar drift and quantum signatures of the Stargate universe. Their findings were grim. The dimensional membrane had sealed behind them. There was no tachyon pulse, no chronoton particle emission, no warp slingshot maneuver that could pierce the barrier between realities. They were trapped. Aboard the Resolute, Obi-Wan spent hours in deep meditation. He reached out into the cosmos of this universe. He felt trillions of lives, alien species, ancient dormant powers, and the lingering threat of the Ori. He realized the Force had brought them here for a reason. The Republic and the Separatists were a galaxy away, perhaps lost forever to time and space. But the duty of a Jedi remained: protect the innocent, preserve the peace. Anakin struggled more with the isolation, pacing the observation decks, thinking of Padme. But the thrill of the recent battle and the clear, undeniable evil of the Ori gave him a sharp, immediate focus. He had a war to win. When the Enterprise and the Resolute entered standard orbit around Earth, the SGC was thrown into a state of bewildered awe. The Prometheus had been destroyed, the Daedalus was in Pegasus, and the Odyssey and Korolev were battered. Now, Earth had a 3-kilometer-long Star Destroyer and a nearly 700-meter-long Federation flagship orbiting their world. A massive debriefing took place at Stargate Command, deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Picard, Riker, Data, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Captain Rex sat at a long conference table with General Landry, SG-1, and representatives of the IOA. The sharing of information was unprecedented. Carter was fascinated by Data, treating him with a reverence usually reserved for ancient technology. Geordi and Carter immediately began discussing the integration of Starfleet deflector technology and Asgard plasma beam weapons. Picard was appalled by the concept of the Goa'uld and the absolute fanaticism of the Ori, recognizing them as a threat on par with the Borg, but driven by religious zealotry rather than biological perfection. Obi-Wan and Anakin listened intently as Daniel Jackson explained the lore of the ancients, the Alterans, and the ascension to a higher plane of existence. The Jedi understood ascension in their own way, recognizing the ancients as beings who had become one with the cosmic force. When Daniel described the priors, beings granted telekinetic powers and vast knowledge to enforce worship, Anakin scoffed. He stated that a prior was nothing but a dark-side acolyte with a walking stick, relying on parlor tricks and fear to control the weak. The President of the United States, via secure link, formally requested the aid of the Federation and the Republic in the coming war against the Ori. Both Picard and Obi-Wan agreed. They were stranded, but they possessed the means to turn the tide. A formal alliance was struck. The Tauri, the Federation, and the Republic would stand together. The following months fundamentally altered the Stargate universe. The war against the Ori did not unfold as a desperate guerrilla resistance, but as a clash of titans. The industrial might and technological supremacy of the displaced ships gave Stargate Command an overwhelming advantage. The SGC established a secondary, massive orbital shipyard facility, utilizing beaming technology and Republic engineering droids. Geordi LaForge, Samantha Carter, and the clone engineers retrofitted Earth's Daedalus-class ships with Starfleet regenerative shielding and Republic hyperdrives. The standard Earth hyperdrives were fast, but Republic Class 1 hyperdrives allowed the Tauri to cross the galaxy in mere hours, completely outmaneuvering the Ori fleet movements. The Ori, believing they were facing a beaten foe, launched a massive offensive, sending prior-led armies through stargates across the Milky Way. They expected easy subjugation. Instead, they met the combined ground forces of the SGC, Starfleet Security, and the 501st Legion. On the planet Chulak, a stronghold of the Free Jaffa, a prior arrived through the Stargate, accompanied by thousands of Ori foot soldiers in their gleaming armor. The prior slammed his staff into the ground, projecting a massive telekinetic wave meant to crush the Jaffa resistance. Instead, the wave hit an invisible wall of force energy. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker stepped out from the ranks of the Jaffa. The prior's milky eyes widened in confusion. He attempted to use his powers to choke the Jedi, to set them ablaze, to crush their minds with the will of the Ori. Anakin merely raised a hand, effortlessly deflecting the prior's telekinetic assault. With a flick of his wrist, Anakin used the Force to rip the prior's staff from his hands, shattering it against a stone pillar. Without their staffs, the priors were severely weakened. Without their telekinetic superiority, they were just men. Obi-Wan leaped into the air, his blue lightsaber igniting, cutting through the Ori front lines with a speed and grace the religious zealots could not comprehend. Behind the Jedi, Captain Rex and the 501st Legion opened fire. The sheer disciplined, coordinated volley of blue blaster bolts from the clone troopers devastated the Ori infantry. Worf, leading a detachment of Starfleet security with phaser rifles, provided heavy flanking fire, the phasers vaporizing Ori armor on impact. The Battle of Chulak was a decisive, crushing victory for the Alliance. In space, Picard took supreme command of the Allied fleet. He brought Federation tactical brilliance to a galaxy that was used to slugging matches between Goa'uld motherships. When the Ori attempted to secure a beachhead over Dakara, they were met by the Enterprise, the Resolute, and a refitted Odyssey. Picard utilized the Picard maneuver, taking advantage of the Enterprise's warp drive to perform micro-jumps within the battlefield, creating sensor ghosts that bewildered the Ori targeting systems. The Enterprise would appear, unleash a devastating volley of quantum torpedoes into the rear engines of an Ori ship, and warp away before the enemy could turn. Meanwhile, the Resolute served as a massive anvil. Ankin commanded the ship from the bridge, ordering aggressive, point-blank broadsides. The Venator's heavy shields, reinforced by Federation structural integrity fields adapted by Geordi, absorbed the Ori primary weapon blasts long enough for the turbo lasers to chew through the enemy armor. Arc 170s and V-wings established absolute space superiority, hunting down Ori fighters and bombing shield generators. The Priors were completely demoralized. Their gods had promised them a galaxy of unbelievers ripe for the slaughter. Instead, they found an impenetrable wall of phaser fire, turbo lasers, and Jedi magic. The Ori Crusaders began to surrender, their faith broken by the overwhelming might of the Federation Republic-Earth alliance. However, the war could not be won simply by defeating the fleets. The ascended Ori themselves had to be dealt with. Daniel Jackson and Merlin's consciousness had still developed the Sangral, the anti-Ori weapon designed to wipe out ascended beings. The plan was to send it through the supergate to the Ori home galaxy. In the original timeline, this was a desperate suicide mission aboard the Odyssey. In this new reality, it was a heavily escorted, meticulously planned operation. The Enterprise, the Resolute, and the Odyssey arrived at the supergate. The Ori, desperate to stop them, threw their remaining 6 motherships at the ring. It was the largest space battle the Milky Way had ever seen. Picard sat in his command chair, calmly orchestrating the chaos. He ordered a classic Starfleet Delta formation. The Enterprise took the vanguard, absorbing the brunt of the Ori fire with its regenerative shields, now boosted by 0-point modules provided by the SGCDI. Worf fired quantum torpedoes in a continuous rolling barrage. Ankin pushed the Resolute to its absolute limits. He ordered the massive Star Destroyer to literally ram a crippled Ori mothership, the Venator's heavily armored wedge-shaped prow cleaving through the glowing ring structure of the enemy vessel, tearing it in half in a spectacular display of brute force, before unleashing a point-blank turbo-laser barrage that vaporized the remains. Under the cover of this overwhelming firepower, the Odyssey, cloaked and shielded, slipped past the chaos. Carter dialed the supergate. The Kawoosh erupted, destroying another Ori ship that had drifted too close. The Odyssey launched the Sangral through the event horizon. Moments later, the heavy, oppressive presence of the ascended Ori vanished. Across the galaxy, the Priors fell to their knees, their connection to their gods severed. The war was over. The crusade was broken. Adria, the Oratai, the genetically engineered leader of the Ori armies, attempted a final, desperate stand aboard her flagship. She possessed powers far beyond a normal Prior. She breached the bridge of the Resolute, intent on killing Anakin Skywalker, the man who had shattered her fleet. She threw clone troopers aside with waves of telekinetic force, her eyes burning with fanaticism. She confronted Anakin and Obi-Wan, boasting of her divine right to rule. She unleashed a torrent of telekinetic fire, a force that would have incinerated any normal man. Anakin stood his ground. He reached deep into the Force, tapping into the raw, unbridled power of the Chosen One. He didn't just block her fire, he absorbed it, his lightsaber acting as a conduit. Obi-Wan flanked her, moving with serene speed. Adria realized too late that she was fighting beings who manipulated the very fabric of the universe on a fundamental level, not just through genetic engineering. Anakin thrust his hand forward, gripping Adria in a localized stasis field of force energy, completely paralyzing her. She screamed in rage, unable to move a muscle, her divine powers utterly nullified by the living force. They did not kill her. Instead, she was handed over to the Tok'ra, who extracted the Goa'uld Ba'al from his host and placed him in Adria in a complex operation, eventually leading to a stalemate that neutralized her threat entirely, locking her in an eternal internal struggle before Ascension could be weaponized against the Milky Way again. With the Ori destroyed and their armies disbanded or captured, a new golden age dawned on the Milky Way. The stranded crews of the Enterprise and the Resolute accepted their fate. There was no going back, but there was a vast, unexplored universe in front of them. The United Federation of Planets and the Galactic Republic lived on in spirit, forming the foundation of a new interstellar government alongside Earth. Stargate Command transformed into the central hub of a new, massive galactic alliance. Clone troopers trained Jaffa in advanced infantry tactics. Starfleet officers taught Earth crews the intricacies of warp theory and peaceful exploration. The Jedi established a new enclave on a verdant, uninhabited world provided by the Asgard, seeking out Force-sensitive children across the Stargate network to rebuild an order dedicated to peace, completely free from the corruption of the Sith or the dogma of the old Jedi Council. Captain Picard became an ambassador at large, his wisdom and diplomatic skill preventing countless wars and forging treaties between former Goa'uld worlds, the Lucian Alliance, and Earth. The Enterprise remained the flagship of exploration, pushing into the deepest corners of the Stargate network, where no ship had gone before. Anakin Skywalker, freed from the impending doom of his fall to the dark side in his own universe, found a sense of peace. He had saved a galaxy, not as a pawn of Palpatine, but as a hero standing alongside his master and his men. He commanded the Resolute as the supreme defensive deterrent of the new alliance, exploring the Pegasus galaxy and aiding Atlantis against the Wraith, a war that ended remarkably quickly once the Wraith Hive ships were introduced to Federation quantum torpedoes and Republic turbo-laser batteries. Obi-Wan Kenobi sat in the quiet gardens of the new Jedi Enclave, watching a new generation of Padawans practice with training sabers under the dual suns of their new home world. He smiled, feeling the Force flowing strong and bright through this universe. They had been pulled from their homes by a cosmic accident, hurled into a war of unimaginable scale. But they had not just survived. They had brought the best of their worlds with them. They had turned the tide, ended a crusade of false gods, and built a legacy of peace that would span the stars for millennia to come. The journey was different than the one they had charted, but the destination, a galaxy united in peace, was exactly where they were always meant to be.